Hola, Efe. Thank you so much for being part of Conversas. It's a big pleasure for me to have you here. This conversation is aligned in current calls to sort of decolonize the Canadian arts sector. What that means, I don't know. And this is precisely why I'm talking to people, because I thought while the question is very big, I think there are many creatives, many artists that are sort of already embodying like decolonized, like, ways of thinking, of doing art. And I thought we should maybe shine the spotlight on your exploration of human existence in the digital era. So, talking about your work is quite a big thing because it spans from art to corporeality to gender, biology, technology, and music, but also challenging binary norms and cultural hegemony. But beyond that, I think you're a very passionate advocate for gender and diversity balance in the music and digital arts sector. So thank you for your openness and participating and sharing this conversation.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Oh,
and
it's
to
my
participate
pleasure.
with Conversas.
So, how does your interdisciplinary approach influence your exploration of complex themes such as corporeality, gender, and technology in your artistic practice?
I'm really into connecting things. I think that talking about diversity, one of the things that the hegemony make us to think is that we are different, but not in that kind of different, like we are opposite worlds or different worlds that cannot be in talk, that cannot conversar. Exactly. In that sense, technology, science, cultural heritage, the thinking philosophy and everything like in the disciplines are so isolated. And I really like to put in together because I think that the daily bases are just made by everything together. Like our bodies and our embodiment of life is atravesado, is like crossed by all of that stuff. So I think that in my practice is trying to put a focus on where that connections can be made and make visible in a kind of art context.
Very, very interesting because as you spoke, I thought it actually resonated a lot with part of the themes that I'm trying to explore, which is like interdisciplinary dialogue, because I feel like everything has been so separated so much that the only way we can actually reimagine futures is by actually bringing all the different parts or whatever that works here and experiment in this part. So that said, can you elaborate on how you challenge binary constructs and cultural hegemony through your work as a transmedia artist and gender activist?
Of course, that is not like an statement on how to do that. It's just like I'm kind of improvising. But binary culture, it has the heritage on dualism, and that is a really strong and I don't know how to say that, but very close thing to see the world. Like the good, the bad,
Exactly.
the ugly, the beautiful, the all these categories. And I think that my way to do that is confront it and see what happened between that. And in terms of gender, I like to take what is in these kind of norms, like it's supposed to be. I don't know what is to be male, what is to be female, no? And we know that that is not that, but the categories exist. So like, okay, so the strength, how to put in dialogue the strength with the delicate things, how to put darkness into shiny things, how to find this gray, between dark and shiny things. You can do that. And I sometimes do so explicit things talking about that. For example, doing installations with meat, with animal meat, and talking about that explicit body that anyone can see or we won't see that, It's like in that materiality, there's a lot of things that we don't want to see. We don't want to talk about it. So for me, it's important to talk about it, not literally, but give some questions on that.
To address it. I know. I get this sense of like dualism being a very rigid, way of like even like seeing the world and seeing everything. That can be very utilitarian sometimes, but it's so rare that we actually question it, and I like how you say like, how can I put like dark things and like shiny things, like. So in what ways does your artistic vision defy genre categorization, and how do you navigate between different musical styles and visual aesthetics?
I was born in the middle of Los Andes, and in that place there was like the popular music, but there was also influence of a lot of things from everywhere because of colonization, basically. So there was like the Andean music, but there was also rock music. There was like Caribbean music and Pacific music, and there was also, I don't know, indie pop or all these genres that are not born there, but they are so here in that place. And when I started doing music, playing guitar and piano, I just noticed that everything can be together too. So when I was a child, I played metal, but with really nice drum and bass things. And then I started learning electronic music with synthesizers and all these things. And for me, it was just, I felt I didn't fit in that genre. For me, it was like, I love a lot of music. And how to put this together is maybe just playing it together.
Confronting the different.
Yeah, exactly. Confronting, and if it is a very noisy thing, what happens is it becomes a melody. And if it is a melody, how to become it a very drum-based thing. And from that drum-based thing, how these drums can turn into some note similar to orchestra, So,
But you also go beyond that to explore, like, other disciplines and other ways of thinking outside of music. How does your exploration of taxonomy, gender, and technological art address the connections among the electronic arts, bioart, biopower, and post-structural studies?
In that sense of connecting things, when I started to doing electronic music, I also start understanding that I have a passion on systems and in electronic freaky stuffs. More than art, I consider myself an artist, not a technician, but I feel that I resonate with that material. So with electronic music, I started to understanding what was electronic arts, the new digital arts, and seeing that panorama, I also was kind of interested on how, especially the north of the world, is super interested and really interested in the hegemonic science, in how to do art with hegemonic science, like the rigid science, like how to really develop a good artificial intelligence, how to develop a great system to track cells in a microscope or something like that. And for me, it's quite interesting, but it is also like putting again in the binary box. And this art is correct and this art is not correct because it is functional, it works completely fine or not. And for me, when I start working with biology, it was like thinking also about myself. It was like, but we can deconstruct biology, the the way we think biology, it's about taxonomy. And there's a history of science to catalogate things, to shape things, and to do this kind of boxes that have attributes. And when in that box something emerged that have another attribute, so you need to do another box.
Another box,
Yeah. In that box is like in gender. At least now I feel that we are in a better time, that we are trying to shape our life, not being just male or female, you know, in these boxes so rigid. And for me it was like doing a gender transition was like the same of doing a transition in art with biology and art with the technology, you know? So for me it was like, if we are performing, what happens if a microbiota can perform, you know? And what is that performance exactly? The performance is that I made a really good systems to I don't know if that cell is a fungus or another thing, or it can be just like dialogating with that, no? You know, like, okay, give yourself the chance to have surprise. You know?
Exactly, yeah.
So, for me, it's in science and arts, we can see something that in the scientist field is more evident than in art and science field. That the meanings of the things are in constantly change because we are trying to understand. We do not understand. We are trying to describe reality. We don't know what it is exactly. You know, when the theory becomes one thing, then in a couple of years it becomes another thing. So I started to think that science is not as rigid as art with science.
Okay.
I started
so
to
science is not as rigid as art.
In the discipline of art and science, we try to do perfect things. And there is in science and a lot of fields that are open to investigate. And that thing for me is kind of really different because we position ourselves not in the scenario, you know, just in the public, just in the world. So, I think that, for example, in gender transition, one of the things that for me was surprising, it was like taking hormones, you can open gates. You don't have breast, you can develop breast. It is on your genome, you know? So it's just,
biologically it's something that already exists and you have a mechanism to become that
exactly. It's like changing a code, but changing something that already exists. It is not that you are pushing on a totally artificial way. And in science, a lot of things are like that. For example, in chemistry, mostly all the chemical things becomes from natural things, from biology, you know, from plants, So, I think that sometimes in art, we really try to do that artificial things, to control the things like we are synthesizing something, you know?
Sometimes it's not the art or the body, it's the way we think about it, is what we put in our heads as like what is right, what is wrong, that makes it even more difficult and more rigid.
Talking about taxonomy, I'm not a scientist on biology, but as I know, the way to categorize species or specimens is changing. Some people are trying to understand that certain families are actually not that families, but are so close to other things that before they thought that were separated.
Oh, well.
And I think that we can start also understand that in other spheres of our life.
Yeah.
So for example, in taxonomy, the problem until the last century, it was like, if that is that, it's okay, it's good. So there is a moral thing.
Yeah.
If it is not that, it's bad, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that not doing that, not putting the moral thing, will make richer things, like more complex things, but also more simple things, like just accepting that there's a lot of different possibilities, and that possibilities can be available, and it is not bad that something that have to be in certain way is not like that. So yes, I think the
Yeah, like just as a parenthesis, some people say there's only good or bad music. What would you say about that?
I think that it is a very close perspective of life and hearing and
Of dualism.
experience. Maybe we can be a little bit more honest in what we liked and say, yeah, maybe I don't like it, but it doesn't mean that it is bad.
Yeah. That's polite.
Yeah, but not just in polite things. I mean, I understand that we are humans and we cannot like everything.
Yeah.
But for me, the complex thing, it starts when we start judging. The way we judge, it's also the way we discriminate. It is also the way we start the cycle of violence. So in music, that it is something that, well, without talking about lyrics, just instrumental music, it is something that you just hear.
Yeah.
And you resonate or you don't resonate with that.
Frequencies.
See, frequencies, it's waves, it's, I don't know, feelings, emotions.
Yeah.
And for me, is way to put moral in something that doesn't have to be. And I think that it is super rooted in colonialism because it is culture, and the colonialist way said what is culture and what is not culture.
What is not culture, yeah.
What is civilization and what is barbarian.
It's very interesting you say that, because even in terms of music, I was listening to you and I'm like, sometimes you might not like something the first time you hear it, but that doesn't mean you won't like it in 2 months or 3 months. So even that, like saying good and it's bad or good, it's never a permanent thing as well. So it's always ever evolving.
Yeah, I think that is what about the big question. Talking about the structuralism, that is the way we understand the world is also in words. So if that words are charged of morality, we start another thing. And it's super different to use the vocabulary to describe and the vocabulary to judge.
Do you think taxonomy is a judgmental science?
I think it doesn't have to be, but it became a judgmental science. I think not in structural, but in post-structural studies, I really like this idea of the non-rigid categories. So it is okay to find language to talk about something, but it is also nice if we can just let the language evolve and change and get another meanings, because in this interaction of how we live and how we talk about what we are living, we construct the reality, and that is way to deconstruct also the reality. So for me, the taxonomy is, if it was just categories that can change, the category, the whatever, woman, that just it was that. Yeah, it seems that it is not that. Maybe it is also that. Oh, yeah, it seems that it is not that. Maybe that corresponds to another thing, and do it like more fluently without so much problems.
Yeah. And what inspired you to create biosynthetic borders? And how does it emphasize the interconnectedness between human beings and nature?
At the beginning of the work, it was like trying to relate with something that we can see and also that we can touch, that we are touching in everywhere, in every place, but not, we are not conscious about what is our relation with the microcosmos. So it was more, at the beginning, more a game on putting the micro things on a macro spaces. But then it also becomes I don't know, an intimacy dialogue with creators or with process, not just creators, also process. For me, for example, I was not super interested in the composing thing, but when I started that work, it was super, I don't know, amazing for me to understand that the things that are in the composition are in the composition because there are other creatures that are emerging. For example, what happened with live beings, for me it was super interesting that the animals, the animal world, have all this microbiota inside, and when we stop living, the microbiota that was part of us, it is also the microbiota that start taking this territory, And then I start thinking on that territories and how we, even if we don't think about it, we are constantly colonizing things, like for our survival, it is super important the hygienic system, the cleaning. And the cleaning is, we can also see it as a way of stop other creatures to emerge, stop other creatures to grow. So yeah, for me, that work, not doing things with the microscopes, but then also like trying to take care of some of the bichos. It was like, okay, maybe a bit of humidity or something or to eat, It was like another way to relate with materiality. So I think for me it was more an experience than an artwork, but it becomes an artwork because I just need to do that. And I started doing the visual things around that and thinking on how to take sound of it and all this stuff. But for me, it was more like a really interesting dialogue with other species that we just don't notice. And I think that happened with other species, but it also happened with humans. And for me, it was like, okay, being conscious of that, it can be also being conscious of the otherness, in the big sense of otherness. So I think that was the connection with that, with human beings, with gender, with, like, okay, try to know a little bit about the others, that you have interactions and sometimes you don't even notice that you're interacting with.
Yeah. So how do you advocate for gender and diversity in the music industry and digital art sector? And what challenges do you face in this endeavor?
We have now a kind of platform label that is focused on Latin American artists, but trying to also focus on take kind of the most biggest diverse artists and help some the artists that maybe doesn't have the tools for making, for example, a good mix or making, for example, a good mastering. I think that in the practical sense of it, we are trying to give some spaces that in the normal world, in the, I don't know, academics or universities or whatever, there's a lot of people that doesn't have the chance to be there.
Yes.
So we think that it is so common to talk about visibility, and it is super important to do visibility to certain groups of minorities. But the visibility, it is not enough. We do not do the process to know how it works also in privileges and the privilege of knowledge. So, for example, doing a curation of a compilation or something like that, we try to understand that, talking about good or bad music, that there is some tracks or some songs from people that maybe doesn't sound technically well, but we can go there. We can talk with that people and do the thing of sharing the knowledge, sharing tools for production, sharing tools for mixing, mastering, everything. So one of the things is that platform. I also think that in not a so evident way, for me it's also kind of trying to occupy certain spaces that are occupied for just a few kind of people.
Yeah.
So one of the things that is kind of hard, that is when it becomes a popular thing, there also becomes a lot of tokenism. So the tokenism is like heavy, like we have to have a transgender person. So let's do something and put the transgender person because it is a rule.
Yeah. And as a founder of the electronic music label Fragment A, what values do you employ to create an inclusive space where artists can grow, connect, and build capacity?
I think that the world is trying to always ask ourselves about what we mean with diversity. Because I think that when we are talking about inclusion, sometimes we can just get blind about who we are including, or what are the mechanisms or the forms to include. So our values are just to hear at the beginning, to have a good hearing, not just in music, also in the people. And with that good hearing and trying to know the other one, that it is working or tentatively working with us. There is also the starts another thing, that it is trying to get dialogue, develop certain connection, and then start working. For us, it's like the process is to get a relation and try to know what we are doing and the people that we are putting together.
Yeah.
So it is kind of an emotional process that we are trying just not to be a label in that sense. We are not just editing things, and we are trying to not just do what we like, and put on releases what we like as the creators, but knowing the people, getting to do the relation, the work of understanding that there's another human being. So I think that the main thing is to humanize the work of a label, Like the label is trying to be civilized. It is not trying to build a fan base or something. It is not trying to build a business as a label. But we also think that changing the way we work with the others, it is also the way to change the industry or the music
culture,
sector.
in the industry,
So for us it's super important to know that there's a lot of people that will be not in the label because they have a lot of other spaces, and this label is for people that doesn't have that spaces. But it is also to have community, but not in the sense of community now.
Like online.
Because community now is like networking.
Exactly.
So it is not like that. It is just like to really understand and to really care about the artists or the creators or the people that maybe just have questions. We also try to hear to music or to works that not comes from people that are artists. In the job sense of just like putting the focus on the human part of it.
It resonates a lot with me, also with FEZIHAUS, my company. I call it like a label-inspired workroom because I didn't want to call it a label. Why it's interesting to hear you is that it speaks to this idea of like asking ourselves, what is value? What is value in music? Is it to like run and create an artist that will make 1 million plays, or it's to like build an artist and develop it, especially in an industry that has less and less interest in developing artists because it costs a lot, obviously. But I feel like labels like you having this approach is something really, really important and necessary. But going to the last question is just a general question that I ask everyone I talk with. In an ideal scenario where fairness is not approached incrementally, but rather has an utopian ideal, what does a world that embodies true equity look like to you?
For me, like being from a country that has a lot history of violence, one of the things is community, not violence. And for me, that implies changing our mindsets of competitiveness. So I think that it could be an ideal world, a collaborative world, and a world of care, not a world of competition, not a world of domination. A world where we can understand that we are not alone, that it's kind of obvious, but we are integrated in a whole environment of necessities, and everybody has their own necessities, and maybe in that world we will care of that necessities more than trying to put the people or the creators that have that necessities away.
I like how you talk about non-competitiveness because yeah, it's like it's a hard one, especially if we're thinking like it's almost like counterintuitive in that humans as we know them, they're very competitive, but at the same time it's such a necessary and an important value. It's like it's culture change work, so it means that if you're teaching people and you're educating people, kids to like at least not always think in those traditional binary competitive terms, like I win or I lose. You're creating a place where people know that they don't have to always think like that. My utopian ideal is that too, is like we're not dissociating the art from the well-being. And also we're not dissociating the well-being from the means that allow the art to happen. Like this idea of not really diabolizing money and resources, but taking them to use and trying to create a very fair ecosystem. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was really nice to meet you.
Yeah, same here. Same here.